flight attendant asked the black woman CEO to exit the plane. Then she made a single call that froze the $4 billion deal. It was a cold Tuesday morning in Texas when Maya boarded the flight set for New York. Little did she know she would be met with the worst embarrassment of her life. She was seated, minding her business when it all happened. Earlier that morning, the airport bustled with impatient travelers rolling suitcases over polished floors that gleamed beneath bright, artificial lights. Maya Harris sat in the VIP lounge, poised in her tailored navy suit, tapping deliberately at her tablet. She was reviewing final notes on a $4 billion deal, one that promised to secure hundreds of jobs and take her company to unprecedented heights. Her assistant, nervous but efficient, hovered nearby, reading updates aloud in hushed tones. Maya listened, nodding occasionally, but her gaze never left the lines of the contract. Even in this moment of calm, her posture radiated power, shoulders straight, head high, a woman who had fought too hard to ever appear small. She reached for her cup of tea and sipped it with slow precision. Her dark eyes scanned the crowded terminal beyond the glass walls, watching families reunite, business travelers stride with importance, airline staff call out boarding groups. The announcement for her flight crackled overhead, and she closed her eyes for a brief, centering breath. Years of sacrifice and long hours unfurled in her mind. Boardrooms full of skeptical men. Investors who spoke over her. Advisors who suggested she bring a more experienced partner. She remembered the humiliating moment she swallowed down because she had no other choice if she wanted the power to change things. But that was behind her. Today she was the CEO. The deal was as good as signed. She felt a ripple of satisfaction warm her chest as she gathered her tablet, checked her watch, and gave a small nod to her assistant. "Time to make history," she whispered. She rose gracefully, adjusting the strap of her expensive leather bag, and made her way to the gate. The agent scanned her boarding pass with polite efficiency. "Thank you, Ms. Harris. Enjoy your flight," the agent said with a practiced smile. Maya nodded back, her own smile polite, controlled. She stepped onto the jet bridge with her heart light, feeling the small but satisfying thrill of victory. She was heading to New York to sign the deal that would be remembered for decades. Inside the cabin, the cool air carried the faint smell of brewed coffee and stale air conditioning. First class was a pocket of calm away from the chaos of the world. She slipped into her seat, carefully arranging her coat and bag. Her tablet lay in her lap, notes glowing on the screen. She double-checked the financial projections, mentally rehearsing her meeting. Her gaze swept over fellow passengers who were absorbed in books, headphones, hushed phone calls. She felt a measure of safety here, among other professionals who presumably understood the world she navigated. A flight attendant passed her row. The woman's smile seemed forced, brittle, but Maya met it with warmth regardless. "Good morning," Maya said softly. The attendant nodded tightly. "Morning." Maya caught a hint of tension in her face, but chose to let it go. She had too much on her mind to overanalyze a stranger's mood. She inhaled deeply, centering herself again. As the last passenger settled in, Maya tried to push aside the exhaustion she felt. Years of fighting, of proving herself over and over, left a residue she couldn't quite scrub clean. But today would be worth it. She thought of her team back in Houston. Good people who depended on her leadership. Suddenly, she felt that familiar surge of purpose. She wasn't just closing a deal for herself. She was making space for other black women to follow her path without groveling for respect. She leaned back slightly in her seat, tapping her tablet screen to flip to her closing arguments. She practiced them silently, mouthing words only she could hear. Then footsteps approached. The same flight attendant, face now set like marble. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said curtly. Maya glanced up, puzzled. "Yes. Can I see your ticket again?" Maya blinked. She had already been seated for 10 minutes. She lifted an eyebrow but maintained her calm. "Of course." She handed it over. The woman frowned deeply at the perfectly valid ticket, as if she needed an excuse. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. "This is first class," the attendant said flatly. "Yes," Maya replied evenly. "That's my seat." But the attendant wasn't satisfied. She seemed to relish the moment of authority. "I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to exit the plane." Silence. Maya's breath caught. "I beg your pardon?" "You're making other passengers uncomfortable," the attendant added without emotion, as if reading from a script written by centuries of unspoken rules. The words were quiet but landed like gunshots. Maya felt the heat rise to her face but willed it back down. Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. She looked around. People were watching. Some stared openly, others turned away quickly. A few lifted phones discreetly to film, not to help. Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice to remain steady. I'm not doing anything. I've been sitting here quietly. I'm going to have to insist, the attendant said, eyes cold, voice clipped. Maya's fingers curled around the armrest. Decades of slights, insults, backhanded compliments, and racist barbs threatened to spill out of her in a torrent of rage. She wanted to scream, to refuse. But she knew that even one raised voice from her would confirm every ugly stereotype in the minds of those watching. So she swallowed the fire. She forced herself to move slowly, deliberately. She gathered her tablet, her notes, her bag. She rose, standing as tall as she could, head high despite the burn of humiliation in her chest. She felt every gaze on her as she walked the narrow aisle back toward the exit. Whispered comments scratched at her like thorns. Did you see that? Wonder what she did. She must have said something. She didn't look at them. She didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Stepping onto the jet bridge felt like stepping off a cliff. The door shut behind her with a cruel finality. She stood for a moment in the sterile tunnel, trembling with rage she could barely contain. This wasn't just a bad day. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was every single battle she'd fought to be seen as worthy, dragged out into the open for strangers to judge. And she knew, even then, even as her eyes burned with unshed tears, that something fundamental had changed. She would not forget this. She would not forgive it. And when she sat down in the terminal, head bowed, fingers curled tightly around her tablet, she began to plan exactly how she would make them pay. She stands, chin high, refusing to let them see the fury in her eyes. Her breath is shallow but measured, the practiced calm of a woman who has learned to keep her dignity no matter what the world hurls at her. Clutching her sleek leather bag, she pivots slowly, aware of the dozens of eyes that follow her. Some look away guiltily. Others are wide and fascinated, hungry for spectacle. A few hold up their phones, pretending to check messages, but angling their cameras just so. She can feel the heat of humiliation flush along her neck. Her heart thuds in her chest, each beat a drum of rage she forces down. Maya Harris knows this moment. She's lived it 1,000 times in different forms. The closed-door meetings where no one listened. The fake smiles when she walked into conferences as the only black woman in a sea of executives. The suspicious glances when she claimed her success. But this is public. She tightens her grip on the bag, its leather biting into her palm. She will not let her hands shake. She begins to walk, slow, deliberate steps down the narrow aisle. A man in a suit quickly looks away, pretending he never stared. A woman with pearl earrings frowns, clutching her armrest like Maya might snatch it. A teenage boy keeps recording, the tiny green light on his phone a pinprick of cruelty. Maya doesn't break her stride. Her heels click against the floor. A rhythm she focuses on so she doesn't hear the whispers. She must have said something. I heard she was aggressive. Crazy how some people act. Her gaze fixes on the front of the plane, refusing to look at anyone else. The flight attendant who ordered her off is gone, probably in the galley congratulating herself on handling the situation. When Maya finally reaches the door, she pauses for a single breath. The cabin behind her is silent except for the muted cough of a child. Then the door swings shut behind her with a heavy, mechanical thunk that sounds like a prison gate slamming. She is out. Banished. The jet bridge is cool and sterile, harsh white lights buzzing overhead. Her eyes sting. She will not cry here. She refuses. But her steps falter once, a tiny hitch, like a sob threatening to break free. She crushes it down. Walking through the tunnel feels endless. The air smells like disinfectant and recycled misery. Her own breathing is too loud in her ears. Halfway down, she stops. Presses a palm to the cold metal wall. Her body trembles with rage. She can see her reflection in a narrow window, eyes bright with tears she won't let fall, jaw clenched so tight it aches. She closes her eyes. And the memories come. The teacher in grade school who said she was so articulate and meant it as a surprise. The boss who told her to smile more in meetings. The investor who asked if she was the assistant. The landlord who needed extra verification before renting to her. Every moment she swallowed. Every insult she laughed off. Every time she decided she was too tired to fight. Her chest heaves. Then she pushes off the wall and keeps walking. At the end of the jet bridge, the door to the terminal slides open with a hiss. She emerges into the chaos of the airport, its noise roaring in her ears, rolling suitcases, crying babies, flight announcements crackling overhead. It's a different world out here. No first-class cabin. No forced civility. Just strangers who don't know or care what she's endured. Maya's eyes dart around. People look at her, then look away. She is just another passenger who didn't make her flight. No one knows she was humiliated. No one knows the deal she was flying to seal. But she knows. And it feels like acid in her veins. She walks with stiff precision toward the lounge. Her bag feels so much heavier now. She wants to scream. She wants to hurl it across the polished floor. Instead, she forces her breathing to slow. Inhale. Exhale. Hold it together. The sliding doors to the lounge part as she approaches, the VIP logo gleaming above her like an accusation. She walks in, every movement controlled, chin high, the way she's always had to carry herself in these spaces. Inside, the lighting is dimmer, softer. The buzz of conversation is low and refined. She's barely a step in when she sees him. Her assistant. He spots her immediately, eyes widening in alarm. He nearly drops the tablet he's holding. Maya. He calls, rushing over, voice full of panic. What happened? They told me you weren't on the plane. Are you okay? Did something happen? She raises a hand, fingers trembling just enough to betray her. Not now, she says. Her voice is raw, cracking at the edges. He freezes, mouth open, not sure if he should speak again. She can see he's frightened, not just for her, but of her in this moment. She can't even blame him. Her eyes sweep the lounge. Curious faces glance up. Executives with loosened ties. A couple in designer coats. A flight attendant chatting with a pilot. All of them look away quickly when she meets their gaze. No one wants this scene. Maya's throat tightens painfully. She swallows, blinking hard. She turns away from her assistant, whose mouth works uselessly in silent worry. Her feet move automatically toward the far corner of the lounge, where two low armchairs sit in half-shadow beside a potted plant. She reaches it and drops into the chair, her body suddenly too heavy to hold up. She sets her bag down with a dull thump. She leans forward, elbows on her knees, fingers digging into her temples. Her mind is a storm. What will she tell the board? What will she tell the partners waiting in New York? How will she explain this? How will she justify walking off that plane instead of fighting to stay? And beneath it all, the ugliest question of all. How many people watched her humiliation and felt satisfied? She feels the tears rising again. She bites her lips so hard she tastes blood. She will not let them see her cry. Not here. Not now. But for the first time in a long time, Maya Harris has no plan. No clever words. No strategy. Only the heavy, suffocating memory of every time she's been told she doesn't belong. And the sickening knowledge that despite all her titles, all her money, all her victories, it still wasn't enough to stop them from putting her in her place. Her breathing hitches once. Just once. Then she goes still, eyes burning holes into the polished floor as the lounge hums on around her, oblivious to the quiet devastation happening in its corner. Morning arrived with a pale glow over the city skyline, cold light catching on the glass towers and gilded logos of corporate empires. The sun hadn't fully broken through the low winter clouds, but its reflection was enough to turn the river into a line of dull silver. Inside Maya Harris's office, the light was colder still. Her walls were lined with framed awards, each glinting in the early glow. Best CEO of the Year. Top Minority-Owned Business. National Innovation Award. Photos were arranged with equal precision. Her team laughing at a company party, her parents at her side when she cut the ribbon on the new headquarters, the mayor shaking her hand at the Chamber of Commerce event. The room felt like a monument to all she had built. And yet the only sound was the dull buzz of her phone, vibrating where it lay face down on the table. It had been buzzing for hours. Missed calls stacked in red notifications. Voicemails from lawyers. Emails flooding in with increasingly frantic subject lines. Urgent. Call me. We need to talk. Maya didn't pick it up. Instead, she sat perfectly still, her fingers resting lightly on the arm of her chair, her gaze fixed on the city beyond the windows. Her assistant, Joel, hovered in the periphery of the room like a ghost. He hadn't dared sit. He hadn't even put down his tablet. He just stood there reading out the news in a voice that wavered despite his best effort to sound calm. They're calling it a total collapse, he said, eyes skimming the screen. Business Insider says the deal falling apart will cause layoffs on their end. Stocks opened 8% down this morning. It's in every business section. She didn't move. He swallowed, shifted on his feet, continued. CNBC is running back-to-back coverage. Analysts arguing about what happened. Some of them think you're bluffing. that you're going to come back to the table. Her jaw tightened just slightly. He saw it and faltered, but went on. There's a Wall Street Journal op-ed saying this proves personal emotion shouldn't drive corporate strategy. Her eyes flickered. That one hurt, even though she'd been bracing for it. Emotion. That's what they always called it when she refused to be humiliated quietly. Joel's voice broke slightly as he read the next line. An impulsive decision from an inexperienced leader jeopardizing billions. She let out a breath, steady and slow. She heard every word but refused to react. Outside the office door, people were pretending to work. She knew that. The whole company was on edge. They were checking the headlines on their monitors, whispering in small knots, shooting worried looks at the closed door. They didn't know if the company was going to implode. She didn't know if the company was going to implode. Her eyes shifted to the shelf behind Joel. A photo of her first team of 5 employees. Her and 4 scrappy young people who believed in the idea enough to work for half their old salaries. They'd been so young then. She remembered buying pizza for them every Friday out of her own savings. She wondered if they were watching the news now, if they felt betrayed, if they doubted her. Joel cleared his throat again, more gently this time. Twitter's exploding, he said carefully. She didn't look at him, but she heard the note in his voice. It's actually supportive. People are using hashtags. Hashtag stand with Maya is trending. Hashtag boycott that airline too. He risked a glance up at her, trying to read her. She blinked once. He kept going, voice gaining a tremor of hope. People are sharing their own stories. Black professionals talking about being asked if they're in the right seat. Told they don't look like they belong in first class. Everyone's sharing their receipts. Screenshots. Videos. He scrolled quickly, eyes darting. There's one post with like 500,000 likes. A woman wrote, Maya Harris walked away from $4 billion because they treated her like she was lucky to be there. I'm not begging for respect anymore either. He let that hang in the silence. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. It wasn't relief she felt. Not pride. Not yet. It was just exhaustion, so deep she thought it might eat her alive. The memory of the jet bridge felt fresh and raw, like a wound reopened with every headline. The way the door had shut behind her. The hush of passengers who pretended not to see. The smirk she thought she saw in the corner of the flight attendant's mouth. The unspoken truth that no matter how much she had accomplished, she could be put back in her place with 4 quiet words. You need to leave. She felt the sting in her eyes but blinked it away. Joel shifted uncomfortably, lowering the tablet a little. Maya, he began, but trailed off when he saw her expression. Her jaw was tight. Her shoulders were stiff. He knew better than to push. He cleared his throat again. There's, also a statement from the airline. Maya let out a bitter laugh, short and humorless. Of course there was. Joel swallowed. They said they regret any misunderstanding and that they're committed to diversity and inclusion. The words were so predictable they almost sounded automated. Maya stared past him, through the window. The city was fully awake now. Cars streaming over bridges. Delivery trucks lining up at docks. Office workers scurrying into lobbies. Business as usual. She felt a flash of fury. Not at them. At herself. For hoping it would ever be different. Joel read another headline aloud, trying to fill the silence. Harris's walkout sparks corporate reckoning. Another. Airline's biggest partner pulls deal over bias allegations. He hesitated, then added quietly, their stock's down 12% now. She didn't react. But her fingers tapped once against the table, a tiny staccato of anger. They were feeling it. She had made sure of that. Every executive who thought their complicity was safe behind NDAs and friendly golf games was now watching their bottom line bleed in real time. They wanted her gone? Fine. But she wasn't leaving quietly. Joel's voice had gotten softer. He wasn't reading news now. He was talking to her. Maya, people are saying you're brave. That you did what they've always wanted to do, but couldn't. She turned her eyes to him at last. He froze, surprised at the sudden weight of her gaze. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't grateful. It was fierce. And behind it, grief. I didn't want to be brave, she said, voice low. He opened his mouth, then shut it. She let the silence hang. I wanted to do my job. Close the deal. Grow the company. Make sure everyone here keeps theirs. Joel's eyes dropped. She shook her head slowly. They wouldn't let me. He shifted uncomfortably. She watched him squirm for a moment, then looked away. The phone buzzed on the table again. She picked it up slowly this time, turning it over in her hand. She didn't answer the calls, but she read the subject lines. Pleading. Threats. Offers. Apologies. Demands. All the same people who would have praised her yesterday for being professional were furious now that she had cost them money. And she had. She wasn't naive about that. It wasn't just the airline stock. The other company's valuation had cratered. Hundreds of lawyers and accountants who'd been prepping the merger were suddenly trying to build time for work that wouldn't be paid. Employees on both sides were panicking over layoffs. She had set off an earthquake. And the epicenter was right here, in her office. Her breath trembled for a moment. She didn't let it become a sob. Instead, she set the phone down carefully. Joel waited, silent. She could see he wanted her to say something reassuring. Tell him they'd make it right. Tell him they'd renegotiate. Tell him she'd fix it. But she didn't have those words. Instead, she leaned back, exhaling slowly. Her gaze landed again on the framed photos. Her team. Their faces were so bright. They had trusted her. They still did. She hoped. She closed her eyes, letting the cold morning light spill over her. Somewhere below them, in the lobby, she knew reporters were already gathering. She could picture their questions. Why did you walk away? Do you regret it? Do you realize what this cost? She would have to answer them eventually. But not now. Now she let the silence fill the room. She let herself feel the sting of loss. But beneath it was something else. Something harder. More certain. She hadn't been able to make them respect her. So she'd made them pay for not respecting her. And for now, that would have to be enough. She heard Joel's voice, quieter, but steadier. They're going to call all day. Do you want me to handle it? She opened her eyes, met his gaze, nodded once. Tell them I have nothing to say. He nodded. Okay. He started to leave, then hesitated at the door. Maya, he said carefully, for what it's worth. I'm glad you did it. She didn't respond. He left quietly. Maya leaned forward at last, elbows on her knees, head bowed. The headlines scrolled on screens all over the world. Analysts speculated. Executives panicked. Customers threatened boycotts. And Maya Harris sat in her office, surrounded by symbols of everything she'd built, and let herself feel it all. The cost. The anger. The shame. The defiance. The knowledge that even if she lost everything now, she had forced them to see her. Not grateful. Not passive. Not lucky to be there. But powerful enough to say no. And make it hurt. It was well past midnight when Maya finally exhaled and let herself feel the quiet. The city beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows was a sprawl of lights, neon signs, blinking towers, headlights streaming across bridges like endless possibilities. She stood there, arms folded, staring out over the grid of streets she'd claimed as hers, letting the hush of her empty office settle around her. The glass was cold when she touched it. She pressed her palm there anyway, steadying herself, feeling the chill bite her skin. It helped her think. Helped her remember. Power wasn't just the ability to sign a deal. It wasn't a glossy headline or a dollar figure with too many zeros to count. It was this moment, alone with the consequences of her choice. She'd walked away from $4 billion because she could no longer bear to stay silent. Because for too long, she'd accepted that indignities were the price of entry. Her reflection looked back at her in the glass, sharp suit rumpled from hours of pacing, hair frizzing slightly from the long day, eyes ringed with exhaustion but lit from within with something fierce. She remembered being a little girl with 2 big shoes and second-hand dresses. Her mother smoothing her hair before church, whispering, "Know your place, Maya. Don't talk back. Don't make trouble." She tried to obey. For years. In college, she'd bitten her tongue when a professor said she was surprisingly eloquent. In her first job interview, she'd smiled politely while a VP asked if she was the diversity hire. In boardrooms, she'd explained her credentials over and over until her throat went dry, watching men who hadn't read the brief nod along dismissively. Even now, the words were there at the edge of her memory like a ghost. You're making the other passengers uncomfortable. She let the words play again in her head and then deliberately erased them. They had tried to make her small. They hadn't succeeded. And now they never would. Her eyes swept over the city she'd helped build in small, invisible ways. Her contracts kept construction crews working, financed tech startups, backed community housing. She put people to work, paid them well, made sure their kids got braces and school supplies and hope. She'd always believed she could do more from the inside. Change things quietly. Show them she belonged by outworking, outsmarting, outlasting everyone else. But no amount of deals or awards had protected her on that flight. They still thought they could throw her out. She pushed away from the window and walked slowly back to her desk. Stacks of folders sat in neat piles, contracts ready for signature, notes scribbled in the margins, plans that had been derailed. She ran her fingers over them, feeling the weight of all that was lost. She'd cost them billions. She'd cost herself billions. Jobs would be threatened. Shareholders would be furious. There was no erasing that. But there was also no erasing the fact that for once, she hadn't swallowed her pride. She hadn't let them win. She pulled out a legal pad and clicked her pen. The scratching sound as she began to write seemed too loud in the quiet office. New strategy. She underlined it twice, hard enough to leave dents in the paper. She didn't want apologies. She didn't want meaningless diversity pledges. She wanted partners who understood what respect meant, who understood that inclusion wasn't charity, it was good business, who wouldn't need to be convinced not to humiliate her employees in front of strangers. No more polite warnings. No more second chances. She would demand it in writing. She would put it in every contract. She would make sure no one who worked for her would ever sit on a plane or in a boardroom and be made to feel they didn't belong without knowing they had her backing, her money, her absolute support. Because respect wasn't optional. It wasn't negotiable. It was the minimum price of doing business with her. She set her pen down and flexed her sore fingers. A smile ghosted across her lips. It wasn't a sweet smile. It was the kind of smile that promised trouble for anyone who thought this was the end of her. She was tired. Bone-tired. But lighter, too. Like she'd dropped a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. She could feel it in her shoulders, in the looseness of her neck, in the slow, deep breaths that no longer hitched in her chest. They'd wanted her to know her place. They hadn't realized her place was wherever she chose to stand. She would make sure they never forgot it again. She closed the folder on her desk, turned off the lamp. The office fell into shadow, lit only by the spill of city lights through the glass. She picked up her bag, slinging it over her shoulder, feeling the comforting tug of its weight. Before she left, she paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. This space had been hers since she could afford an office at all. It had seen her victories, her failures, her fears. Tonight it had seen something new. A line drawn in blood and iron and will. She didn't whisper goodnight. She didn't promise to fix everything in the morning. She simply squared her shoulders. And as she turned to go, she said, voice low but unshakable, respect is non-negotiable. Then she walked out into the waiting night, ready to start again. If you enjoyed Maya Harris's powerful journey, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Tell us in the comments what you think about how Maya chose to stand her ground and how it all ended. Rate this story on a scale of 10 and let us know where you're watching from. Your thoughts matter. Was Maya right to walk away? Let's hear your perspective on her courage, the fallout, and her unwavering demand for respect.